Okay, so chapter 10 is the Mediterranean society, the Greek phase. And later on, we're going to start studying the Romans. So right now we have Greek, and then chapter 11 are the Romans. So, this is just a map showing classical Greece. Again, this is where Greece is located today. We have the island of Crete, which is off the coast. Mount Olympus, this is kind of the basis. Again, they have sea travel, they have land travel across as well. So they're in a pretty good location, and they're able to develop, also their close proximity to Rome leads to have both developed that Hellenistic kind of culture, very similar kind of art, music, all of those, architecture, those types of things. Okay, so the early development of Greek society, the Minoan society is on that island of Crete that I pointed out in the last slide. And they have basically between 2200 and 1450 BCE, it becomes the center of Mediterranean commerce. And it has an untranslated form of writing, which is where scholars are unable to decipher linear A script. So a type of writing is not easily translated. They received influences from both Phoenicia and Egypt in this. And eventually by 1100 BCE, Crete fell to foreign domination. So that's actually what this was. A series of natural disasters after 1700 BCE. So here we are, foreign invaders, foreign domination again by 1100 BCE. The Mycenaean society was formed where Indo-European invaders descend through the Balkans in 2200 BCE, and they're influenced by their neighboring Minoan culture. They also adopt the linear A into their script and then form it into linear B. They have major stone fortresses in Peloponnesus, which is in southern Greece, and they protect their agriculture very heavily there. They militarily expand throughout the region, and they eventually overpowered the Minoan society and expanded further into areas like Italy, Sicily, places like that. So there are chaos in the Eastern Mediterranean after the Trojan War in 1200 BCE, and literary works that include these are Homer's Iliad and the sequel of the Odyssey. And this political turmoil lasts from 1100 to 800 BCE, and eventually the Mycenaean civilization will disappear as a result of the chaos. Okay, so the world of polis gradually emerges in Greece, and it's a city-state where there's a very urban center where it dominates and surrounds the rural areas. It is highly independent in character. It has its monarchies. They have tyrannies, not necessarily like oppressive, like king really overpowering, but there's one person in control, and eventually they'll lead to early democracies as a result. So Sparta begins to extend control during the 8th and 7th centuries, and highly militarized society. It has subjected people, serfs are the people who are tied to the land, kind of like a farmer. They outnumber the Spartans 10 to 1, and the military society develops to control the threat of rebellion. So no one can really revolt against Sparta because it's such a military power. It's like a military machine. So again, the Spartan society discouraged social distinction. They wanted everyone to kind of be military based. Distinction though is drawn by your discipline and your military talent. So if you were military superior, then you were higher up in the kind of classes. Boys were taken from their families at the age of 7, so I think first grade, maybe second grade. They were receiving military training in barracks, similar to like military training we have now at like 18. And active military service follows that military training. They can be married, but they don't stay at home with their spouses until they're after 30, where they're out of the military. And eventually, by like the 4th century, they relax their strict kind of regimented life. In contrast, there's Athens, which gradually broadens kind of its political participation, develops the early democracy for only free and adult males. So while they say democracy is for everyone, women and slaves were excluded. This, again, contrasts the Athenian style with the Spartan military style. They're two very different ways of governing. And I should also add that the early democracy, foreigners, any people that were not originally from Athens, were also excluded from voting. So here in the Athenian society, like we said, it's very different from Sparta, and it begins, again, maritime trade, so trade on that ocean region that they have, brings about prosperity to Attica, which is a region in Athens. Aristocratic landowners were primarily the beneficiaries, so the smaller landholders really didn't get anything from that trade. And it increases, again, with the wealthy aristocrats versus smaller landholders. They have a difference and a divide in socioeconomic classes, and class tension will intensify, particularly by the 6th century BC. So, Solon and the Athenian democracy, again, one of the aristocrats tried to mediate the crisis by letting aristocrats keep large landholdings, but forgiving debts, banning debt slavery. They removed family restrictions against participating in public life, and they institute paid civil service. So they kind of try to make it a better place to live. Pericles is ruling, he rules from 451 to 429 BCE, and it's a high point in Athenian democracy where he is aristocratic but popular among the people. He begins massive public work projects, trying to improve the area, and he encourages cultural development. Okay, so when the Greeks kind of take over into like the larger world on your outline, that's the next section, Greece and the larger world. In Greek colonization, Greeks founded more than 400 colonies that are all over. They facilitate trade among Mediterranean lands and people. Again, the coastal Mediterranean and the Black Sea, Sicily, Naples, or the Neapolis, or New City, southern France, and Anatolia in southern Ukraine. Here is just a quick map of classical Greece and the Mediterranean basin during this time, 800 to 500 BCE. So you have Italy here, you have Greece here, you have the Byzantine Empire, you have people coming across, China's over here, African societies are over here. And you have the major areas in Greece right here, Athens, Corinth, Sparta, Thebes, Olympus, all those places. So the effects of the Greek colonization, again, they trade throughout the region, so it's spreading ideas, spreading cultures, communication of ideas increases between languages and cultures, and eventually the political and social effects are, again, of its democracy, of its kind of people kind of having a say in their government. So the Persian Wars begin 500 to 479 BCE, and it's a revolt against the Persian Empire. Athens supports using its ships. The Greek rebellion is eventually crushed by Darius in 493 BCE, and the successor of Xerxes burns Athens, but is driven out as well. Trying to think of actually the Battle of Marathon, which is on your rubric or your syllabus. That's a decisive victory for Athens. Again, the Persian army will retreat. The Delian League. Peleus creates the Delian League to forestall more Persian attacks, so they try to prevent in the future later attacks, and it is led by Athens, which massive payments to Athens fuel like an expansion, and it's resented by other people as well. So for the Peloponnesian Wars, and you should have talked about these hopefully last year, we're going to watch a video on Monday about this. It's neat. The tension led to 2 armed camps under the leadership of Athens and Sparta. Unconditional surrender of Athens in 404. They're forced to surrender, but the conflict continues between Sparta and other police. The Kingdom of Macedon, it was a frontier region, kind of northern of Peloponnesus. King Philip II builds a massive military there and kind of start taking over the region. It begins to kind of come into areas that are controlled by the Greek in the south, so that's going to eventually lead to tension as well. I think they're going to, Alexander of Macedon, he was like Alexander the Great. You've heard of him, I'm sure. He succeeds Philip at the age of 20. He begins his conquests by 331 BCE. He's controlled Syria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. He invades the Persian homeland and burns Persepolis in 331. That's successful. He just spreads all throughout the Mediterranean bases. He turned back in India when his exhausted troops kind of turned against him. But he leads tons and tons of, you've heard about Alexander the Great, but he leads tons of battles and ways to kind of claim land, spread his influence, and he'll eventually die at the age of 33. So here is again Alexander's empire. Alexander the Great will spread to everywhere, including areas almost as far as modern day India, down into Africa, areas obviously in Greece, Sparta and Athens, areas in where Syria is, Mesopotamia, everywhere is now kind of controlled by Alexander the Great. And this is his route. He obviously started over in Macedonia and Greece, and then just spreads everywhere. So he starts over in Macedonia and just spreads from there, branches off by Palestine towards Syria, and then again into Egypt. Okay, so our Hellenistic empires, there's competition for his empire after he dies, again at 33, which is really young. It's divided by generals into kind of 3 separate sections or realms, and there still is like an economic integration between the 3 and intellectual kind of cross-fertilization, they say in the book. They still share ideas, but they're still controlled by separate people. The Antigonid Empire is the smallest of all of them, and they have continual tension between the rulers and the city. The economy of Athens is flourished again through trade, so they're kind of still somewhat affluent, I guess, but locally there's dissent. They're not really happy with this. The issue is primarily on land distribution. Since there's colonization, they're not happy that the people are not happy that they're being kind of taken, land's taken, their areas are being shrunk. So, happy. The Ptolemaic Empire, that's the wealthiest, so in contrast, it's really wealthy. They have state monopolies on textiles, salt, and beer. So state controls all of it. It controls the production. First, production of the resources, the production of the resources into a good, the sale, the distribution, the price, the profit, everything will go to the state. So they become very rich because people, through trade, want textiles, salt, and beer. And their capital is Alexandria. And this area, again, this empire is in Egypt. And the capital, Alexandria, is in the mouth of the Nile. It's a very important port city. It has a major museum, the Alexandria Museum, the Alexandria Library. It becomes very culturally rich as well as monetarily rich. The Seleucid Empire, this one is the largest, and it's from Bactria to Anatolia, and it's a pretty big area of colonization. It sends Greek culture and values as far east as India, and therefore it's widespread in influencing other areas that were traditionally not even really close to Greece. And some Greek colonists will flock to the Greek cities of the former Persia, and they create the colonists in this empire now that's actually not in Greece. They create kind of a Mediterranean-style urban society in their new area. So the Greeks kind of leave, they go there as a place to be, and they change the native or the original culture to the kind of one of their own. So trade and integration in the Mediterranean basin, and that is under if you're filling out your outline, that's under 3. The fruits of the trade, Greek economy and society. So Greece has little grain as far as wheat, but they are rich in olives and grapes. So the colonies will further trade in that area because those are goods that people want. They can't grow elsewhere. That's a good place for the climate, that temperate kind of climate. It's good for olives and grapes. Commerce rather than agriculture is the base of the economy, so they're really reliant on other people, and they're relying on the production of olives into olive oil, grapes into wine, and to get that grain that they need. And it leads to a broader sense of Greek community because they have this kind of culture that they're starting to create, like, I don't know, I think like signature foods, their signature olive oil, their signature wines becomes, again, like that Mediterranean. When you imagine being in the Mediterranean, those images, it's very like classic Greek. So the Pan-Hellenic festivals become a place, they're kind of like the Olympic Games, and they're useful for integrating far-flung colonies. All the colonies come together and compete against each other, and it creates like a collective identity. So similar to the United States, like patriotism, it's like a support of your own country and your own region. This is what these festivals, these Olympic Games do for the people in Greece or the Greece empires. They have like a sense of community, a sense of belonging, an identity, a cultural identity beyond just like maybe a region. Like the whole place gets an identity. So we do still continue to have a patriarchal society. So women are goddesses. They're goddesses. They're wives. They're also engaged in prostitution. They have limited exposure in the public sphere, so they don't have much of a voice. As far as the partial exceptions to the rule, Sappho, which is one of your people that you'll be doing for your love tweets that we'll talk about on Monday. She is a famous poet, and her poems are of a attraction, and she instruction young women in music and literature at home. Critics charge her with being homosexual, which is not acceptable for women at this time. So her poems are kind of controversial in a way back then about their meaning. What was I gonna add? I guess I can add how in Homer's works, heroic warriors and outspoken wives were in his world, and those strong-willed humans would clash, while maybe in true society they don't really have a role. Infanticide was not popular, I guess, but it existed, where that's when you would kill a particular, usually females, babies, and killing babies because their women do not have the same power and clout as men do. And I guess the last part, it would be that they could also be in a form of slavery, where they would be like domestic servants, like housewives, like I guess slaved housewives. Some were educated and skilled. Some there were slaves in general that were like educated and may have became like craftsmen, but overall there was, which we have here on this slide. So slaves had different names depending on the area that you were. They were sometimes used in business in order to like run the business or kind of the workings of the business. But it can be an opportunity for them to buy freedom. So if they were skilled in an area and they were kind of enslaved to that business, that public work, they were able to get. And the last section on Greek language, they borrowed the Phoenician alphabet, so that phonetic alphabet. They add vowels, and it evolves into a very complex language, allowing for communication of abstract ideas. Greeks, Hellenistic culture, philosophy, that's when they're starting to think about other people, think about their world, why are they here, what's happening, all that good stuff. Socrates, again, is one of the most popular people. An unexamined life is not worth living. He encourages reflective, the Socratic method. His student is Plato. He's basically condemned for thinking like this. He's being immoral. He's forced to drink hemlock. So he is one of the big kind of leaders from 470 to 399. His student of Plato, again, like am I still recording? Okay, I'm good. So he puts into a system Socratic thought. The Republic is his most famous work, and there's like a parable of the cave situation. The world is imperfect. He believes in like ideal qualities, and in his Republic he expressed like the ideal of having like philosophical kings, so kings that can do more than just rule. They're they practice philosophy, philosophical, and they're able to expand people not only politically or monetarily or as far as trade, but they're able to kind of expand their minds. Aristotle is the Plato student, so we're going right down the line. So when you all are famous, I can be the first one on your list, and then you can have a student. And if that student is Aristotle, he kind of breaks the theory a little bit. He starts devising rules of logic to construct his powerful arguments. Which again, this is emphasis on empirical findings, reason being more than just like feelings. He has a massive impact on Western thought, and he says that philosophers rely on the senses to provide accurate information. So Greek theology, last little bit, polytheism, Zeus is your principal god. There are religious cults as well, and these kind of continue on. Eventually, your rituals are domesticated. The idea of tragic drama, exploring the possibilities and limitations of humans. A comic drama they would like lampoon or joke around about their public figures, kind of make fun of them, think like political cartoons. And there are major playwrights again in this. The Hellenistic philosophies, there's a bunch of them. They practice particularly the Epicureans identifying pleasure as the greatest good, the skeptics doubting the possibility of certainty of anything. The Stoics again, duty and virtue, inner peace. They believe in like doing their role in order to have